things. So that's another thing, hopefully, that helps. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Francisco Arenas Alvarino, who is unofficially the EBT god of EASA, officially Senior Expert Air Operations. Francisco, over to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. John, can I do a radio check first before we start?
Yep, sounds perfect.
Thank you very much. We have a busy agenda today. Without any delay, I would like to introduce first for the welcome speech to our head of department for Aircrew and Medical, Mr. Bernard Bourdon. He's joined the EASA since 2006. He previously managed the investigation and reporting activities and has over 20 years of experience in aviation safety. He worked 7 years in the conduct of accident and incident investigation at the French BAA, where he was also flying state aircrafts as pilot in the frame of his professional duties. He holds a master's degree in aeronautics from the École Nationale d'Aviation Civile, I don't know, Bernard, if I am pronounced correctly, in Toulouse, and he started his career in 1995. Currently, as I said, he's head of the Aircrew and Medical Department, and he's my boss and one of the key fundamental people to complete this EBT project that we have in EASA. Without more delay, I give the floor to Bernard. By the way, just before that, we've been tested today. We've been also vaccinated. That's why we are not wearing in EASA the mask. So, Bernard, back to you.
Thank you, Francisco. Francisco assured me that we will not speak about football, so I did accept to come today. And I would speak about this first EBT information sessions. So our safety promotion colleague, John, did a great job in setting up this virtual meeting. So it's a pleasure really to have this communication opportunity with you and to share views about EBT. After a long sleep, aviation business is slowly waking up. So the summer holidays are starting, and we know that with the increasing amount of flights, what is important is to maintain the safety level to the highest standard. Some pilots may feel a bit rusty, but the aviation system has to cope with it and to equip still this pilot with the competencies to maintain the safety level. So for this, there is a big milestone that has been achieved with the publication of this EBT regulation in December 2020, followed by the decision, the EASA decision on March 2021. So EBT is really the core of the aviation safety. We had, in the wake of the Air France 447, and it's coming to my mind with my background in safety investigation, we have already a push for the upset prevention and recovery training. This goes together with the concept that automation has created safer airplanes. We have airplanes equipped with flight envelope protections, with monitoring, alerting functions, and pilots are using much more automation and are focusing on different tasks than they used to do in the past. So it also means that pilots have to be ready to cope with more complex situations. They have to be trained to take over the manual control whenever the situation deserves it. And they have to be resilient to psychological or physiological effects whenever there is a developing upset. So there is a gap between maintaining the flying skills necessary to handle the flight due to the unavailability of the autopilot, and the maintenance of competencies to cope with complex, stressful situations under heavy workload and sometimes in adverse weather conditions. So today, our EASA safety risk management process is still pointing out at the crew risk management as one of the important safety factors. So we know that under such challenging circumstances, the attitude of the pilot, the cognitive reactions play a critical role for handling an unexpected event. And this is best addressed through competency and evidence-based training. There is no simple accidents. It's usually a combination of several threats, and EBT is really data-driven. It's the opportunity to continuously evaluate the pilot, develop and improve their competencies. We are really moving away from the traditional approach. We are also meeting the needs of modern aviation with a new cockpit concept, with also more automations embedded in our system. And we have achieved a big work with the drafting of the regulation, with, of course, reaching a consensus, reaching a positive vote at the end. And it's not over. We also now need to lead a successful implementation. And for this information session is really the opportunity to share best practices. So I would really like to thank Ignacio Gallego, Fabien Laniel, to bring the airline experience. We have also Sylvia Trancoso and Pascal Foncel for the authorities perspective. And last, we will have Frédéric Moham and Andy Mitchell from ATPG that will support the discussion. So I wish you a fruitful event, a lively event. Keep safe. And I give the floor to Francisco and Ascanio. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bernard. So we're going to start now our presentation. Please, can you give us a minute that we will share our content and do some checks here?
Okay, Francisco, I made you the presenter now. Maybe if while you're just getting sorted, I could just take this opportunity just to say to all the participants, so you'll notice there's a chat and a Q&A function. So if you could use the chat part, just if you have a technical problem or you need to send me as the host a message, and please use the Q&A if you have any questions for our panelists, and we'll try and get through as many of them as we can. Thank you very much. We'll also be running some polls a little bit later, but we'll explain a bit more about that as we go. Fantastic. Thank you. Over to you.
John, can you confirm that the presentation is viewed? And I don't know, because
Yeah,
I
we
have
have it
here some. Yeah, okay, great. And it can be the whole presentation is viewed, or?
Yeah, you have the full screen. It looks great.
Okay, great. So welcome to this presentation. My name is Francisco Arenas. I am the Project Evt and Rulemaking Task 0599 Project Manager. My background, I am a pilot. I am an instructor also. I flew 320, 330, and 340 amongst ATR and other small aircrafts. With me, it will present also Ascanio Rousseau. Ascanio is also senior expert here in EASA. His background is examiner, instructor, captain as well, 747 and 737, if I am correct. But he also has other types rating, like 320. He recently now went through the OSD of the citation, and he's a standardizer and an OSD expert, so the operational suitability data. Without more saying, let me check. I would like to congratulate, first of all, Iberia, Air France, AESA, and the GAC for this big achievement, for being the first airlines approved in accordance with Regulation 2020-2036 and 2020-193, meaning the Ebt regulation, in accordance to the ED decision that we published in March. So big congratulations to France and to Spain and France for this great achievement. I'm gonna pass the floor to Ascanio to also being able to congratulate France and Spain. Ascanio?
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Once again, also from my side, congratulations to Iberia, Air France, AESA, and the GSC. Though this was a long journey, we have to consider that this is also the date where those two big airlines and the two authorities start a new journey on the Ebt. Ebt is very big innovation. Some time ago, Francisco and I were in China when the Ebt was still an opinion, not even published. And we started with this picture. And honestly, we tried to present or to start presentation always with those two pictures. This is a very old style aircraft. I'm not sure that anyone is still flying this one, but still is part of our culture, our background, that we have maybe not so close aircraft, but we have similar one. And this is the very last generation of aircraft. And sorry, we have some problem.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the old one still, and then we have the new 350. And the question is come to our mind and say, why we need to train pilots and check pilots based on the same training program or the same checking program. And then Ebt comes into our rulemaking process, and at the end, thanks to the great job done by Francisco, we were able to publish the Ebt regulation. Back to you, Francisco.
So my first slide is about the project that we have here in EASA. The project started back in 2000 and before 2015 with the assessment according to the Ebt principle when the ICAO document 9995, and prior to that with other colleagues that supported the ICAO document 99995 and the IATA report for evidence-based training. At that time, the agency was assessment according to the Ebt principle. We were starting the idea of assessment according to the Ebt principles. Then in 2015, we published the ED decision that applies to the Ebt mix implementation. That was rulemaking task 0696, and you can find these explanatory notes and terms of reference and the background of this rulemaking task in the EASA website. Then we proceed to the recently published regulation in December 2020 and in March 2021, where we allowed the operators through rulemaking task 0599 phase 1 to implement Ebt Baseline. In the Ebt Baseline, now the license revalidation for the first time is done following the data provided by the competencies and the grading system, rather than maneuvers as is done in the traditional checking in the LPC and OPC. From then on, we will move into a new phase in rulemaking task 0599 later on in 2022. And this will go beyond the ICAO provisions and the ICAO concept of Ebt, and we will move into the Ebt operators conversion course and Ebt type rating courses in order to allow a single philosophy of training in the operator. So the idea is that not only recurrent training, but also OCC type rating, command course, and other courses are done following a single philosophy of training, the philosophy of Ebt. But also EASA is working on a Ebt data report for helicopters, because our idea is that we can expand the concept of Ebt amongst other types of aircrafts, starting with helicopters, in order to make sure that we have a single philosophy of training throughout the industry, and we can exchange learning points, data points among the industry. So now I'm going to explain why we started Ebt. I've been explaining this chart a long time ago and in many presentations. So probably for most of you, this is a repetition. This chart is from Airbus, but what you need to see is that, first of all, we still have some improvement to make. It's true that from generation 3 and 4, the safety enhancement is being great, but maybe there's still room to improve. And then another idea that we would like to highlight here is that the generations have different risks. And one of the key elements that I want to highlight here is that the second generation, due to the complexity of the operational environment and some other reasons, is growing. You know, instead of improving the safety, is going backwards. So there's the need to drive training programs per generation to ensure and mitigate the operational circumstances of each aircraft generation. So back in the old times, during the times of generation 1 and 2 on the Constellation, the pilots were having many events. It's like going to the casino many times. However, those dices, when they go to the casino, were simple. So there was a repetitive and unforeseeable events. We have the evidence as a regulator and as an industry, and we knew what to train and we knew what to expect. With generation 2 and 3, the same philosophy follows, and now the systems are getting more complex, and the pilots doesn't need to go to the casino so many times. However, however, the dices have become a little bit more complex, but we are still in a situation where the events were repetitive and foreseeable. There was an evidence, and the regulator and the industry knew what to do. However, now we have the regulator paradox. The regulator paradox is a concept that is not only for aviation, but this is imported from nuclears and other industry, informatic industries, where the regulator have this paradox in which the systems are super reliable. There's hardly ever any time in which the pilot will go to the casino. However, when an event happens, the complexity and the dices are very, very extremely complex. In fact, Airbus or the 787 that we have there, they are very complex aircraft, very reliable aircraft, but with many possible ECAMS warnings. So the regulator and the industry face the reality of having only unique and very unforeseeable events, very rare, occasionally happened. Then we don't have evidence a priori, and therefore the industry and the regulator are in a situation in which we don't know what to expect. Is the famous black swan event in which we need to deal with. We think that Ebt addressed this matter and other things as well. So when we started back in 2014, when I joined EASA, we started to study new training programs, advanced training programs in which we could help the industry in this matter. Bernard has explained about 447, mentioned the accident of Air France 447, but this was a reality that we had to face, that we were having certain accidents that we had to mitigate, and we had to try to not have it ever again. So EASA started a study with research facilities, with research public entities like NLR and others, and we kind of highlight here some of the elements that EASA considered in order to introduce Ebt. So one of the elements that I already highlighted is that accidents and incidents still happened, and the pilots still have a valid license proficiency check. So we thought that there was a need to improve the license proficiency check and try to reduce the hole. This doesn't mean that we will fix everything, and obviously accidents will happen in the future. However, there's the intent to mitigate and to improve this matter. Also, another element that we all know is that the non-technical competencies are very important, a contributing factor in most accidents nowadays. You have here some data. The source is from UK CAA, and this presentation will be available for you guys in the EASA website, so you can review this data again. Another element that we all need to be very aware is that the traditional training is not has to keep up, or is not keeping up with the development and new challenges facing by the operational risk and by the airlines we have today. So we need to mitigate that element, and we also need to mitigate the operational risk associated with today's environment and today's technology. We also are pretty aware, and this is very important today, especially after COVID, that efficiency and effectiveness needs to be a driving factor. Another element that today we live in a global data environment, and aviation and training programs are need to be on the front line of this, and we need data-driven systems, but those data needs to be meaningful. It needs to be standardized, and that's why the agency has made in the Ebt regulation strong efforts about the standardization, and that data collection needs to be standardized and be useful for the operator and for the industry. We cannot forget that amount of data, increased amount of data, needs to follow the just cultures and data protection. And again, here the agency and the Ebt has provide increased regulation and increased guidance to ensure data protection for the pilots. But now that we are talking about Ebt, Ebt means evidence-based training. And what are those evidence? What are those layers of data? The first layer of data is the regulators, is the data report. I already highlighted this for the helicopters and other things. My colleagues in EASA already participated at that time in the document 9995 and in the data report for evidence-based training. So there's a work that the regulator needs to do to study, to address and to identify the accidents and incidents that has happened in the industry. Another layer of data is the operator. This means the operational data and the training data. And with this data, the operator will tailor the regulators layer into a specific recurrent training and checking program. Then we cannot forget the instructor with the assessment of the crew competencies and the observable behavior is able to provide tailored training and mitigate the specific risk of that specific crew. For that purpose, the agency has provided regulation about the grading system. Remember the AMC1 or FC 231 Charlie, where we provide clear and identify ways for the grading system, the level 0, which is binary, the level 1, which is the competencies, 1 to 5, level 2 for the observable behaviors, and 3 for other elements. The agency has taken a lot of time and a lot of resources to make this decision. So the fact that the level 0, competent, not competent, is binary, and this overall grade has a binary approach, is well thought and well researched why this has to be this way. The same with level 1, 2, and 3. So please follow the indications of the AMC1 or FC 231 because it's well thought and it's been researched. Also, for the instructors, And in order to ensure this grading system is appropriately used, we have implemented the ORCA, the Observe, Record, Classify, and Assess. This is following the AMC 3 Oro FC 231 Delta 1. I think it's a useful tool for the instructor and the operators to have a standardized approach to grading system and to obtain this data. So in a nutshell, the worldwide data report done by the regulator has created a generic program based on generations and based on training topics with different. Regulator adds on top of that its own data, training and SMS data, operational data, and tailor this generic program into an airline-specific program, followed by the evaluation in the FSTD done by the instructor, standardized by their own standardization and by the grading system, where we can adapt and train and adapt the program to the particular needs of a particular crew. Now we're going to explain the building blocks of Ebt components. There are basically three. Obviously, there are more. If you go to the regulation, there are more points. But let's take three building blocks now: the Ebt program, the instructor, and the Ebt competencies. I'm going to pass the floor in a moment to Ascanio. But before that, the first building block is the Ebt competencies. There are 9 competencies, 8 from ICAO plus 1 more knowledge. That is the Ebt standard competencies for EASA. These are a tool for the pilot to be able to address the black swan events and other scenarios. We took time to decide these competencies. The agency and together with the European Commission launched a study back in 2012, Manfurgen study led by NLR, in which the public taxpayer has spent some more money in addition to the private participants that help us to develop this study. Manfurgen was led by NLR. Frederick is joining us today, but the main idea of this study was that we wanted to see if the competencies are useful tools and it can be transferable throughout the different scenarios. In this study, we put a group of pilots in a scenario 1 and we assess the competencies. And we follow the question, can those competencies be transferable to another scenario completely different? And there we did the research. We put those in pilots and predict upfront whether in a scenario 2, the pilots will perform on the basis of the competencies correctly or incorrectly. The fact is that the study proved that the pilots that were good in problem solving in a scenario 1 were able to transfer those competencies to a scenario 2. And even more, we put those pilots in a black swan event because we moved those pilots into a nuclear power station and put them some events in a nuclear power station, which will be kind of a black swan event, you know, where they are not familiar with the environment. And guess what? The competencies, the pilot that was good in problem solving in a scenario 1 was able to prove that was good in a scenario 2 and resolve the scenario 2 correctly and followed to a scenario 3 in a nuclear power station and be successful because the competencies can be transferable. So this is an important study. I provide in my previous slide the link to the study. And obviously we have Frederick here with us as a representative of the NLR that could provide more information. Now I give the floor to Ascanio. Ascanio.
Thank you, Francisco, again. As Francisco said, the instructor are a key element on the Ebt program. It's quite obvious the training is always very important. It's important on the legacy system, is even more important in the Ebt training. What we need to realize is that the investment on training the trainer is a return investment. This is something that is valid always, and even more for the Ebt. During the In the Ebt concept, the Ebt instructor has to hold a TRI, which has been a certificate which has been issued in accordance with the part of FCL. On top of that, the Ebt he has to attend the Ebt company course, airline course, and then he has to pass an assessment of competence. Once the Ebt instructor has obtained the Ebt qualification, then start the real work, because the real work is in the airline environment. Instructors are not only properly qualified, but they are also meeting the airlines requirements, which is based on concordance. It is paramount for instructors to have an understanding of the outcome of the training, which is almost equal for everyone. What in the Ebt program we don't want to see is to have the instructor which is always excusing eventually possible deficiency, or the one which is punishing too much. For this, the Ebt training instructor is really important in the Ebt program, and the concordance must be ensured in order to have a proper outcome on the Ebt training. But what about examiner? Examiner are not completely out of the Ebt program, because still we need to have examiner to complete the assessment competence for instructor at the end of the Ebt course. Plus, in this in the Ebt, we don't have the possibility to complete the renewal in the program if the rating is expired more than 12 months. So for a rating expired above the 12 months, we still need to go back on the legacy system through an ETO, do the proper recurrent training, and then do the LPC in accordance to the Appendix 9. However, as we said, we still have the need to have examiner in terms of ensuring that the revalidation process in the airlines is compliant with the regulation, as well as we have requirements that the Ebt manager holds a valid examiner certificate. The Appendix 10, which is the new system through to which we allow the revalidation of rating, is a completely different concept, as Francisco explained slightly before, compared with the Appendix 9. Is not maneuver-based, it takes in consideration the full picture, not just a snapshot. Is based on 1-year training. Considering that, we introduce a possibility for instructor holding also examiner certificate to have the two tests per year counted in terms of maintaining the examiner privileges, conducting the 2 modules per year in accordance with the Appendix 10. Another important rule, and this will be maybe explained later on by our colleagues from the GSE or AESA, is in generic way the competence of the authority approving the Ebt course. But more than that is the qualification and the understanding of the inspector on the Ebt. As we say, the Ebt is a new concept. And they need to be thoroughly understood to go through the whole process and see if the airlines is meeting the requirements established by the regulation, and also to ensure that the desired outcome at the end of the training period is the one that is expected. So training, inspector training is paramount, and of course this can be done in an airline context, of course, and must mirror the MC 1 of RFC 146. But what is the operator's Ebt program? Ebt program is let's say, a merge of different aspects. There is the generic program, which is training topics, and is in accordance with the Appendix 2 of the Doc 9995, as well as the MC2 MC7 from MC2 to MC7 of RFC 232. But is also driven by training data, the 9 competencies, the grading 1 to 5, plus the concordance, which, as we said before, is an important element to run the Ebt program. But on top of that, we need, or the operator need to have operational data. This needs to contextualize the scenario elements. So SMS or flight data monitor or instructor report can be a source of operational data, and is paramount that these data are duly taken in consideration to define the final program. As we said, the Ebt program, as we said, is well described in the regulation, in the MC2 to MC7 or of RFC 232, and then is enough for the operator to start with the selection of the aircraft generation. In the example, we have the 320, which is a generation score. Then you establish and define the training topics with the frequency of for the training. That can be every 6 months, year, or 3 years. It depends by the level, A, B, C. Then you define what is the expected outcome of the training, and then for each training topic, you choose the example scenario element, which needs to be contextualized with the operational data. And one of the examples that we want to show you is the UPRT Ebt program. And as we said, and this is just an example, the Ebt program is based on the assessment and training topics. The upset prevention has a frequency of B, but the upset recovery has a frequency of C. There are also different elements for the preventions and the recovery. Prevention is more focused on crew, and recovery is also focused on pilot, not only on crew. And as we say, the covering of one element of the table is satisfy the requirements to cover the entire element, meaning that, for example, if we take the G-load awareness of management, then you have positive, negative, increasing, lateral, or G-load. There is no need to go through all of them during the 3 years period. That is enough to go just through one of the elements that are described on the IMC. Francisco, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ascanio. So we have explained the 3 building blocks of the Ebt program: the competencies, the instructor training, which includes also the inspector training, and the Ebt program. Now we're gonna explain how the agency is supporting the implementation of the Ebt program in general. And you can see these actions in the EPAS, in the European Plan for Aviation Safety. The last one is 2021-2025. And we are supporting you guys with documentation. We have produced a regulatory material, but not only the regulatory material is even also very explanatory, the explanatory notes of the regulation. The ED decision that we published in March 2021, the 21002R, has a big amount of explanatory notes that we invite you to read to understand the background of each rule that we presented in the Ebt regulation. We also have the Ebt checklist. This is highly recommended. At the moment, we just published we published the Ebt mixed implementation, and I submitted today the Ebt checklist for Ebt Baseline. However, this will take some time. So if anyone is about to implement Ebt Baseline, like Air France or Iberia, already contact us, and we already provided the checklist. Then we have some other papers, especially for Spanish speakers through international cooperation, because we are doing a big effort in Latin America for EBT, and I will explain later on a little bit more on that. We have had a series of workshops. We did this since 2015, and I just going to highlight it, the most recent ones that we did, one in Spain, in AESA, this one that we are doing today, and we will announce a series of webinars for the third quarter and fourth quarter 2021. The first one will start on the 29th of September this year. And the purpose of this webinar that we are doing today is to know what are the key points, what are the most important points for you to launch this series of webinar. So please participate in the pools, participate with the questions, because this will help us to identify the most important topics, and we will address each small topic, each particular topic of EBT, starting on the 29th of September 2021. Other actions that we did, in addition to the computational workshops, is the EBT Mix Implementation Training Day. This is only available for European operators, and this is basically intends to address the particular problems that a specific airline and an inspector will have for the implementation of EBT Mix. Sorry, because I make a small mistake. I put two I's, the EBT manager there. Is the EBT manager plus the flight inspector of the authority that will have a series of WebEx with us and other participants that we follow this program are there. In the old times before COVID, it was face-to-face. Isn't sure when this will be able to happen again, but at the moment we are driving this program through WebExes. We also had international cooperation, and this is the last element for the activities that the agency is following to promote EBT, which is that we did a series of workshops in China, in Asia, but also in Latin America, where we explain our regulation. We have helped successfully to implement in Colombia, and here I know that there are a few colleagues from Colombia, in which I want to say hello, and they have we have helped them to implement the EBT Mix implementation in Colombia. There is the website there that you can click, in which you can view the implementation that of EBT Mix in Colombia. Obviously, it's in Spanish, but you can get an idea about it. Before finishing, and I am just about to finish, so we can take questions for 10 minutes before we finish, we take a break at 2:30, is some advice to the stakeholders. Please follow your regulator, your particular country regulator documentation, or if it's not available or it's in the process to be available, then you have very good documentation in ICAO document 9995 and PANS training, but also we invite you to read and use our EASA regulation. As I said, we have a lean regulation, but more important, the explanatory notes in which we explain every detail on why we did and why we put those requirements in place. If you use private consultants, please use reliable organization. We have several organizations that are well-known public that you can use, IATA, NLR, among others that you can use, but please use reliable organization. Another thing that I would like to say is that there's no owner of EBT, there's no godfather of EBT, there's nobody that can claim the success and the ownership of EBT. This is a worldwide idea done by many organizations and many people. Another idea is that the EBT for for the operators. It's a long journey. You need to think about 5 years, so 1 or 2 years in Ebt Principles and 2 or 3 years in Ebt Mix before you can join Ebt Baseline. Obviously, there are airlines that I know that did only 1 year and basically 3 years for Ebt Mix. So this is just a tentative numbers. Don't forget about the instructor standardization, instructor training, the instructor concordance, and the feedback loops necessary in the Ebt program. And then here there are a bunch of documentation, as this presentation will be held in the website. So for you to download, you can click right away and go to the appropriate documentation. I received some, we are ready to receive some questions. The first question I received was about the NAA and the instructor, the inspector qualification. We can, if you guys vote for that, there's a pool, there's questions that you can put in this webinar, because probably one of the webinars that we could address, it could be the instructor training. Sorry, the inspector training. I'm sorry. So we are ready to take questions until 30 past. Then be reminded that we will have a whole session of questions of 1 hour led by the National Aerospace Center, Frederick and Andy. I'm going to stop sharing and review your questions that you put in the tool. We have many questions. Obviously, we cannot address all of them. I just going into one interesting question that we received from an individual, Paul Niamsi. Obviously, this can be addressed later on in the panelists, but what is the difference between Ebt and CBT, or what is the commons? I always put this example, people laugh, but you know, the CBT is a hamburger, the Ebt is a Big Mac. So Ebt is a specific competency-based training, and let's say we put it a brand, we put it a specific package, and we did this with Ebt. So CBT is the big umbrella, and Ebt is the application of a specific CBT called Ebt, like the hamburger and the Big Mac. I'm sorry for the Burger King and other brands. We have here questions about the OSD and the Ebt type rating. This will be addressed in the rulemaking task 0599 phase 2, expected to start in 2022. So I'm not going to go into much detail. We have specific questions about the OSD here with Ascanio, who is an expert in the OSD and can address maybe during the panelist time some questions about the OSD and how to integrate the Ebt into the OSD. I would like to remind, and as John Franklin said, that we will put the presentations in that website, in the Ops community website. The link is available in the chat, but also in where you registered today for this workshop. So Ascanio is going to take the next question.
Yeah, the question is about if Ebt is applicable to primary flight training. The answer is not. The CBT will cover all the initial training. As Francisco said, the Ebt is a portion of a more complex CBT program. This will come in the future. We are already working on that. However, Ebt so far is not applicable for initial training or for primary training, and we are still working even to consider Ebt applicable for the initial type rating. So this is still a long journey. Back to you, Francisco.
Thank you very much. I will take another question. We have an interesting question from Robert Gottwald about the different documentation and guidance between ICAO, IATA, and EASA. Obviously, we try to harmonize as much as possible. Jean Renier and other leading experts in IATA has participated in the rulemaking task of EBT in EASA. And we are trying to coordinate in ICAO. ICAO is launching a new panel for Annex 1 and a work to be done in document 9995 that we will try to harmonize. Remember that the ICAO document 9995 is published back in 2012, 2014, depending on the documentation. And now we are in 2021. This is almost 10 years. Obviously, for the European operators, we recommend to follow, and is part of the regulation, to follow all the EASA documentation, because the EASA documentation is well harmonized. We integrated UPRT, PBN, and other elements that were not integrated in EBT. And we also corrected and discussed fully some of the elements that document 9995 was not clear, or there was a small editorial mistake that needed to be corrected. So I recommend, whenever possible, to follow the EASA documentation for the European operators. For the rest of operators of the world, you guys will need to choose and discuss with your authority what will be the best course of action. I can say that the EASA regulation and the EASA documentation is well harmonized and has a clear path and clear consistency from EBT to CBTA. Next question. I have a question here that could be interesting from Frank Steiner about the examiners and the relation of the EBT instructor. I quite not understand the question. What I would like to say, and as Kani already discussed about the examiners and the EBT instructor, the EBT instructor needs to follow a specific standardization program covered in Oro FC 146. But for those examiners that are also EBT instructor, they can revalidate their instructor certificate and use part of the EBT. I mean, I have here the expert with me, so correct me if I'm saying something wrong, but we can, they can correctly, if I'm wrong, they can revalidate, or
they have to fly with an exam, with the instructor having examiner privileges before having released by on the flight.
And the examiner can revalidate within the instructor can use the EBT module as means to.
Yeah, but I think that this question is linked to another problem. But yes, the examiner can revalidate or keep currency, because anyway for the revalidation you still need to do the assessment of competence, but keep currency through the delivering 2 modules on the SIM. So this is.
Thank you very much. When can we expect Michel Lacombe? Welcome. Michel is one of the key experts that we use in EASA in the rulemaking task. It's a pity that he retired from Air France, but as I said, he's one of the leading experts in EBT. Michel, the EBT checklist for Ebt Baseline supposed to be published soon. At the moment, we have the EBT mix implementation checklist available in the EASA website. And in few days, I hope, or maybe today, we can have the EBT mix, the EBT checklist for Ebt Baseline published in the EASA website. Again, Michel, a pleasure that you are participating today with us, and welcome. It's now 27 past, so I think we need to stop here. There are many questions. We will take them, all the questions, and see what are the key elements for the next future webinars starting on the 29th September 2021. We will make available this the registration later on. Oh yes, before passing There's a very good question from Marut Ersogu. Will EBT be mandatory for airlines or air taxi operators also? So the question, the answer to the question is at the moment, the agency thinks that the EBT program is a voluntary program. Only the airlines that wish to join the EBT program will join. There's no mandatory there's no requirement to join EBT, and you guys can keep for some time, and there's no anywhere in the agency program to mandate the EBT. So it's still a voluntary program. And regarding the air taxi, Andy Mitchell in the discussion will address some questions that we have for the small operators, in which includes the air taxi. And we will explain a little bit how a small operator voluntarily, including air taxi, could implement the EBT program. So without more saying, I want to give the floor to Frederick, because he has some important statements to do in preparation for the discussions that we will have as the third block. Frederick is a researcher from the NLR. Again, he's a very important expert that participated in the rulemaking task 0599. I will provide a larger explanation about his background, but without more delay, please, Frederick, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Francisco. Yeah, just a real brief announcement about the proceedings for today. Andy and I will be organizing the Q&A at the end of this webinar, the last hour. As part of that, we wanted to have a little bit of an interaction with you as the audience. And the way that we wanted to do that is to have a little bit of a small poll that will run during the coffee break that you can fill in, and then we'll close the poll at the end of the coffee break. And then we'll share with you some of the results in that last hour. So John Franklin is going to help us out here, I believe. Well, we have two polls essentially. One poll is just to take stock of who's in the room, and the other poll is going to be a little more about what the interests and needs are of the people in the room, and we'll share this again with you at the end. So it's just going to be a little collection during the coffee breaks. So take your time, fill it in. At the end of the coffee break, we're going to close this poll, and then in the next coffee break, we'll do the second one. This is also as part of the safety promotion activities of EASA, and also to understand exactly in what areas to do more other webinars in the future need to have attention, as Francisco had already indicated. So this is also a learning opportunity for EASA and the panels. So without further ado, I believe the poll is open, so feel free to enter. And I believe, Francisco, in 10 minutes time, we're going to resume with the program. Am I correct?
Yeah, correct. Please come back at 1440 Central European time. For GMT, it will be 1240. 1240 in 9 minutes from now. Thank you very much. John, I will start again the second module of this Ebt workshop. Can you hear me fine?
Yep, perfect. Works great.
Thank you very much. So welcome to the second module of the Ebt workshop. Now is the time for the airlines and the authorities to provide, to explain and to share their experiences in the implementation of Ebt Baseline. We have both Iberia and Air France that are the ultimate users of this regulation of Ebt. The module number 2 will be a presentation of Air France together with DGAC France to explain the implementation they had until June this year, in which they obtained their Ebt baseline approval. Then it will follow by a presentation of AESA Spain from Sylvia Trancoso, and followed by a presentation of Ignacio Gallego from Iberia. Then we will make a break of 10 minutes, and then we will launch a big module to address all the questions you have about Ebt that will be moderated by Frederick Monham. So this module will take about 45 minutes, followed by a 10 minutes break. So that means that we will start around 15:30 local time here in Europe, the open discussion. So the first presenter is from Air France, Fabian. Fabian is the Compliance and Regulatory Affairs Chief Pilot, Crew Training Safety Manager, and Ebt Manager from Air France. He took this position from Michel Lacombe about 1 year and a half ago, I think. Fabian is a commander in the A320, TRE, TRI, and he also was a pilot manager a few years ago in Air France. He has an amazing curriculum because he's also been involved in the Ops Control Center, so he has a big operational background, flew the 330, 340, 320, so all Airbus. He's, as I said, he's a TRE, TRI, SFI, and he also has a degree in political science in a university in Paris, in France. So without more delay, I would like to welcome Fabian. Maybe Fabian, because due to a technical problem with Pascal Foncel, Pascal Foncel is the inspector of DGAC France, but he's having some technical issues. Maybe Fabian needs to do all the presentation himself. Let's see if we can fix these problems with DGAC France, with Pascal, technical problems later on. So John, if you can give the presenter rights to Fabian, I see he's ready. The floor is yours, Fabian. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Francisco, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Exactly what Francisco said was really bad, but Pascal is currently overseas, 12 hours jet lag from here on the other part of the planet from Europe, and it seems that we've got a huge technical problem for him to connect. So I will try to go through the presentation we prepared together, and I'm going to share it right now. So I will be able to start that presentation. Can you just confirm me that you've got a presentation on the screen?
We have it, Fabian. Fantastic.
Okay, thank you very much. So once again, good morning, everybody. This is a short presentation about the collaboration we had with Ebt, of course, with French DGAC, which is the National Authority for France. And we started working together many years ago. The best illustration we could have on this is that Air France and the GSE was represented in the rulemaking task 599 from the EBT. As you know, and this is why we do consider that that collaboration has been fruitful and almost perfect. The main goal of EBT is to improve the safety for the more efficient training and checking program for pilots. This goal cannot be achieved without an efficient collaboration from the operator to the NAA and vice versa. We have to work all together, otherwise we shall have too many issues to solve and we shall not be able to go through the goal. From the authority perspective, that would have been Pascal's presentation, so I'm gonna try not to mess it up. From the authority perspective, the first point we have to consider is where we're coming from. Whenever an AOC wishes to move towards EBT, the first thing will be to carefully assess the point it's departing from. And we talked about it 10 to 15 minutes earlier. We have some useful tools from the starting with the Ebt Checklist and the mixed Ebt implementation guide. That helps because whenever we say that we have to assess the departing point, we all know that to move to the EBT, we need to be mixed Ebt approved. That mixed Ebt approved can mean a lot of things, including, and that was the case for Air France, including ATQP. So after that completion, of course, the authority has to move through all applicable regulations, and from that regulation, start to point out the differences the operator will have to comply with and to fill in before asking for the EBT approval. So I just said France started with started the process towards EBT from an ATQP approval. Francisco just said that we had Michel Lacombe listening to us, and that I'm very proud of being able to tell him what we think about that, because Michel has been a real visionary about it. He started working on the ATQP many, many years ago, and he's been able to move with a full ATQP plus. When I say plus, this is because the ATQP in Air France has been implemented with additional features. We had all bells and whistles we could have wanted for that. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you have the ATQP topics. On the right-hand side, you have the EBT topics. And as Michel and the whole system in Air France has been able to move one step forward with the ATQP, we had a lot of things already set up for the EBT. As an instance, of course, we had the data collection, flight data monitoring, that has been directly linked to our training program with the ATQP. That means that for the EBT, we did not have to set it up. We decided in 2012 to start the ATQP with a competency-based system and to integrate a CRM and TEM, which means that once again, we had more elements on the ATQP that are required by the regulation by this time. We had to train the TRIs and TREs, of course, and we've been able by this time already to set up the simulator modules with the 3 phases: evaluation, maneuvers training, and scenario-based training. On the way to EBT, we nevertheless had to modify a few things. The first thing we had to look at was the TNA, the task analysis we did for the ATQP. We had, of course, to review it and to be sure that it was still relevant for the EBT. Afterwards, we wanted to adapt the notation system. We had a notation system that was perfectly fit for the ATQP, but we wanted to be sure it would be fit as well for the EBT. And then, of course, we had to review the equivalency of malfunctions we started to implement with the ATQP. And the last point has been what we had to do more. when we started the ATQP, we of course conducted a full safety case, but we decided to start from scratch again for the EBT. We wanted to be sure that we would not miss anything for the EBT. And we had the bonus of the EBT, which is the equivalency of approaches, which is completely new. And of course, we had to take that on board as well. So that was the three main steps we had to look after for the EBT implementation, starting from an ATQP process. This slide shows exactly the same thing, but on the visual screen. You have the transition to EBT starting from ATQP. You can see the dashed lines. The dashed lines will show what is common to the ATQP, what had to be done for the EBT. And this is the look we had, but not only the look, the hard work that has been done, including by Michelle, to foresee that all those things could be done for the ATQP and then would be useful later on, almost 10 years later, for the EBT. You can see on the upper side of the screen the time frame we had to encounter. In 2013, that was the first publication of the 995 from the ICAO, as well the IATA implementation guide for EBT. Actually, that was IATA, ICAO, and IFALPA guide. At the 2016, the world-making task started. 2020, we had that huge COVID crisis, which has been really complex to handle, but as well, it gave us the possibility to wait according to the measures we had to take for COVID. It gave us the possibility to wait a bit for the new training programs. So by the end of the year, when we had the official EBT regulation publication, we've been able to fill in our official file for our official approval request, and then we've been able to get it a few weeks ago. Now we're going to start the first module. On the practical side, as you can see, those are the blue arrows. Those blue arrows what we had to do. Of course, we had to improve our IT systems, because whenever you are on the ATQP system, you've got some useful tools. Now you have to enhance those tools for the EBT. We had, of course, to set up the new training programs. A huge thing, we had to think about the new administrative validation. The Appendix 10 replacing the Appendix 9, which is a bit different, and we had to find out how to cope with that. Of course, you have to set up your operating manual. We had as well to look at the ICAP. Did we consider that the ICAP was fully relevant for the EBT, or did we want to enhance it? Of course, we decided to enhance it a bit. Either although we could have considered that the previous ICAP program for the ATQP was sufficient, but we wanted to do more training and more checking on the system. We had to set up to check that the accuracy of the EBT grading system would be consistent, and of course we had to change management, which is as well a huge task to be sure that pilots and instructors will get on board the EBT system. Once again, 2012 for the ATQP. So as I just told you, we set up the pilots and instructor competencies. We have been able to implement the TEM principles. We've been able to replace the OPC by the LOE, which was the evaluation phase, then the E for training in French, entraînement, in French, which means that we had then the maneuver training and scenario-based training. We set up the malfunction clustering. We've been able to extend line check. And of course, we had direct link to the SMS, the first link for the new programs. 2017, we asked for a mixed EBT approval additionally to the ATQP, which gave us the possibility in 2021 to ask for the Ebt approval, including the approach clustering, the grading system adaptation, and of course, the line evaluation of competence extended to 3 years. From the National Authority Oversight side, the main point we discussed with them, especially with Pascal, who was absolutely not here now, I'm afraid he won't be able to join. We had to demonstrate continuous improvement of the system and the measurement of the Ebt program's efficiency. We have metrics, of course, but we need as well to comply with the change management to be sure that everyone, as I just said, will be on board. So we'll be able to help the system grow it and to be efficient. The regulatory side, of course, paramount. No question about it. We have to comply with the regulation. We have to show up the management of the Ebt program across the 3-year period. We have to show up the training system performance, the grading accuracy as well, and statistics, the metrics we can set up for the pilot performance. That is directly linked to the way the instructors will grade the pilot. This is the definition of the concordance. If you look at the ELSA regulation, consistency, stability of scores between different Ebt instructors. We have to set up the contingency procedures, of course. And once again, the administrative actions are paramount. The Ebt system. With the GCSE, we had a huge amount of work. We had a lot of discussion about it, and we've been able to find the good system for us that was perfect. At conclusion, of course, once again, the Ebt is meant to improve the safety of the operations. We've been talking about the Air France 447. Of course, you can understand that we're directly concerned and involved in improving flight safety. And that goal can only be achieved through an efficient collaboration between the operator and the NAA. And if we can do so, then we'll be able to move forward and get a good full Ebt. So let's talk with our national authority again and again. That will give us the goal we're achieving, improve the overall safety. Thank you very much. I hope I saved you a bit of time, Francisco, and always back to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Fabian, for this wonderful presentation. Now I will move John to Sylvia Trancoso. Please, can you provide her with the presenter rights? Just to confirm that, and I will introduce her.
Yep, she has it. It's just doing now. There, she has it now.
Thank you. Sylvia, if you can try to share your screen. On the meantime, I will introduce you. Sylvia Trancoso is the head of Air Operations Department in AESA, Spain, the Authority of Spain. She's been 12 years working in AESA with different positions, including SAFA senior expert, flight simulator inspector, and inspector of many airlines in Spain, including Vueling and others. She's also associate teacher in the University of Politécnica of Madrid, the Polytechnic of Spain, and in another university, Carlos III. She also, before that, worked for more than 6 years in Airbus, including being the senior engineer in the system design of the Airbus 350. Also she works in EADS, the old Hispanis Construcciones Aeronáuticas, as a safety engineer. Welcome, Sylvia. The floor is yours for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Francisco, for giving me the floor. just to check that everything is okay on the screen.
Yeah, everything is okay in the screen. It's not in presenter view, but this is okay. It can be very well viewed. So
I don't know why, but I have some troubleshooting here.
okay.
Okay, let's
This
try
can be
anyway.
better. We see your presentation, and on the next
Yes.
slide next to.
Yes, I know.
No problem.
Okay.
Thanks. Welcome.
Okay. I would like to seize this opportunity to share with you the challenges we have been facing so far regarding Iberia Ebt approval. Okay. This said, my talk will be dealing with 2 points, which are Ebt approval process and pilot's license revalidation. Okay, let's check. I don't know why, but yes. Okay, when it comes down to talking about the process, you should bear in mind that Ebt implementation will take at least 3 years. Ebt is a voluntary recurrent training program. It is a must, but a recommended. It is not a must, sorry, but a recommended training. It is a choice for the airlines and a decision to make for the authorities. In 2017, Iberia came up with a proposal to change the way of training their pilots safely and efficiently. We studied their proposal and got in touch with EASA, which told us about the suitability of the airlines for this program, because they were not provided before with any other alternative training qualification program for their pilots. Since then, Francisco has been helping us along the process. Iberia case is a good example for all those airlines which haven't previously developed an ATQP. Okay. At the beginning, it was important to rely on Ebt know-how. Ignacio Gallego, Iberia Ebt leader since 2016, was the one who started from scratch. The first thing to do was to establish pilots' competencies and a grading system to assess them. In those years, there was no regulation at all, but we counted on Ebt principle coming from ICAO and IATA documents. A team of 10 examiners were trained for 2 days by Ignacio, who also validated them in a simulator. Then the rest of the instructors and examiners were trained and they start collecting data from pilots. These periods took almost 4 months, with the aim, and the end of this period was validating their system. They performed mandatory training in addition to 2 line-oriented evaluation, LOE. Mixed Ebt developed itself from 2018 to 2020. In terms of compliance, the airline still meets the standard requirement ORO FC 230. You just need to adapt the new elements to your current system. The more elements an airline adapt, the easier the system implementation is. And that's what exactly Iberia did. From the beginning of mixed Ebt period, they designed different simulator scenarios based on the equivalency of malfunction and approaches relevant to operations. On 14th May of this year, we approved Iberia Ebt Baseline program after 4 years working together on it. Up to now, 40 pilots have revalidated their license based on the Iberia Ebt program. Next. Okay. These are the 9 competencies established by Iberia. For each competence, there are a group of observable behaviors defined to allow instructors to perform pilots on training assessment. Nowadays, it's important to remark that the airlines do not have to think about the competencies and observable behavior because they are already defined by regulation. The grading system used by Iberia, let's check. I have some problems. Okay, the grading system used by Iberia is based on Venn model, and it has 5 levels. For every level, an outcome is defined and taking into account how well, how many, and how often the observable behaviors can be observed during simulator training, instructors score pilots' competencies. Iberia has established level 3 as acceptable standard for their pilots. Nevertheless, they consider level 4 as an enhanced recommended standard for them. Okay. Halfway down, Iberia Ebt Baseline includes 6 Ebt modules distributed across a 3-year program. Each Ebt module shall consist of an evaluation phase and a training phase. The validity period for an Ebt module shall be 12 months. The evaluation phase comprises line-oriented flight scenarios to assess all competencies and identify individual training needs. The training phase comprises the maneuver training phase, comprising training to proficiency in certain defined maneuvers. The scenario-based training phase, comprising a line-oriented flight scenario to develop competencies and address individual training needs. This is important. And in fact, Iberia has decided that instructor evaluation phase is different from the training phase. Halfway up, we see the standard mandatory training by which the airline established at least 1 simulator training and 2 OPC, operator proficiency checks per year. Pilots are checked twice in simulator to demonstrate their ability to perform the same mandatory maneuvers. And this is the first conclusion arise, is that the number of simulator training has increased at least by 1 by Ebt. And the second conclusion is that pilots are trained on different scenarios to address their needs. But in fact, for Iberia, it didn't mean a significant change because they had already established 4 simulators per year before Ebt implementation. And in fact, that allowed Iberia to carry on business successfully. Okay, with regards to validation, with regards to license validation, Ebt enrolled pilots have full credit to revalidate their license, which means no additional checking is needed. Instructors have to fill in new Appendix 10 to score pilots' competencies and no more than that. Iberia has implemented Ebt program with 2 Ebt managers, one for long-range fleet and another for short-range fleet. There are examiners for these fleets. Ebt managers ensure Ebt modules completion by signing the Appendix 10. They also declare that enrolled pilots have successfully trained during current cycle and Ebt instructors have properly standardized it. In addition to that, Ebt managers perform a delegation of signatures for a license endorsement. The instructor to whom Ebt manager has delegated the signature will revalidate the pilot license. But remember, despite delegating, Ebt managers remain fully accountable for licenses. Once revalidation by Iberia and all the documents are sent to ask for updating on our database for licenses. So in conclusion, and to come to the end of my talk, I would like to point out the advantages of Ebt program. First of all, in terms of safety, because pilots are trained to improve their competencies, which will allow them to solve successfully any potential issue they may face in flight. Secondly, in terms of efficiency, because Ebt programs highlights operator training and their instructors. Line evaluation on competence can be carried out every 24 months instead of former 12 months line check. And enrolled pilots have full credit to revalidate their license with no additional check-ins. I would recommend the airlines to consider this business case and its subsequent results. I thank you for your attention, and I'm glad to answer any question or that you might have during roundtable discussion after.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you very much. Very well done. Now, following the implementation of Ebt, I would like to introduce to Ignacio. John, can you please provide presenter rights to Ignacio Gallego and make sure that... Thank you, Sylvia. Very well done.
Yep, he has. He should be able to present now.
Okay, Ignacio, while you try to please make sure that you share your screen with us, and then on the meantime I will introduce Ignacio Gallego. He's been more than 22 years in Iberia. He's obviously the Ebt manager of Iberia. He was, in fact, the first instructor together with Lilia to revalidate a license under the Appendix 10. He's been Ebt manager since the beginning of this journey for Iberia. That was more than 5 years ago. He's a TRI 320 captain of Iberia, where he started 22 years ago. He's also been working as a private consultant for different institutions and organizations, IATA amongst others. Also, he's a member of the rulemaking group in 0599 in Ebt here in EASA. Before joining the Iberia, he was in a Spanish company, Naviaco, who was merged by Iberia back in 1999. And I would like to welcome Ignacio for your presentation. Can we do a radio check before you start?
Yes.
Hello, yes.
Good morning, everybody. How do you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Ignacio. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Francisco. And hi, good morning, afternoon to everybody. I'm Ignacio Gallego, the Ebt manager of Iberia. We bring you a presentation about concordant assurance that we have been talking a little bit these previous presentations, and we think about that as a living being. We will see why. As we have seen all this webinar, Ebt is all about data. So we're going to use that data to make all the analysis to be compliant with the regulations, but also to check the health of our training systems through the training system performance. So the job of an Ebt manager, in fact, is to guarantee that all this data is reliable, that all the data is introduced by the trainers are solid and is robust. How are we going to do this? Through the concordant assurance, colloquially talking, what we know as the instructor standardization. So what we need to know is we have the right tools to do all this analysis and detect if there are patterns that can exceed the parameters that's been set in the airline for that concordant assurance. So we are going to take you different patterns. Obviously, there are much more. These are the most easy to detect. They are all based on real data, but obviously for the identification reasons, the figures are fictitious. issues. But the trends, the patterns are completely right and based on real data. So we are going to make this simple exercise. We have here a basic radar chart. This is a trainer who has been grading always, apparently, allegedly, in threes. It could be even a very normal trainer. Maybe we would like even such a bit more movements on the fours and on the twos, but well, being in the mean average in the three is going to be so far okay for us. So we have this grader, this trainer who has graded 30 different sim sessions, and apparently all has been graded as a 3 in the mean average. But is that really what we are looking at? Is that really what is happening? Maybe what is happening here is we have a trainer that's been grading these 30 sessions, but 15 as a 5 and 15 as a 1. So we are looking at this radar chart not in the right way, because we are looking only to the mean average. And what we have here in reality is some sort of Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that nobody of us would like to be in a Ebt program system, or at least to detect it as soon as possible to try to provide with some tailored training, in this case for the training to get into the concordance assurance. So we need this real tool to be sure that we have a whole picture, that we are seeing the whole picture, the whole picture of how that trainer behaves into the sim. And for that, we need a heat map like this, when we can see all the different percentages in all the gradients, including in Iberia, that we provide a lot of value to the non-observed competency. Now we are in a real disposition to really analyze the concordant assurance of these trainers. One of the first patterns that is more easily to identify is this one. These are a trainer who is always grading very, very high in the fours, in the fives, and usually they tend to do it with no gradings in the twos. So this is the most common pattern we are going to identify through a concordant assurance. We can see also in the opposite, it will be a trainer who is grading always in the twos and never in the 4 or 5s, but the usual thing is always to find in the highs, always in the high tops of the grading system. So that would be a very simple example of what can be a non-standardized trainer out of the parameter limits is being implemented in the airline. The second example is very interesting, what we call the hobby horse. Those are the trainers who get used to, very familiar with one competency. They like it very much. So they pay a lot of attention to that. They know they always from memory. So in the end, eventually, they become very familiar to grade this competency, and they can do it very, very easily. They are always talking about the same during the briefing, the same session, the debriefing, and in the end, what happens is paying so much attention, they overrate that competency. In this case, we've seen that it's a very big exceedance through the highs in the fours. It could be also in the opposite direction, it could be in the twos, but as I told you before, the normal thing always in these hobby horses competencies is always trending in the up 4 and 5s. The interesting thing about the hobby horse competency grading is if you see the 8 competencies left, they used to be graded very accurately. So the curious thing is only in the hobby horse when appears all the troubles. This example will be about the non-observed competency. The non-observed grading for Iberia is also very important. We give it a lot of value because it provides us with a lot of information. In this case, and that information, I think, is as valid as the 1 to 5 grading. In this case, we have a trainer who has been grading situational awareness really high a lot of times as non-observed. Here we can be having different things. If it's a single trainer, obviously it's a trainer who has the problems being able to observe this competency, and we are now at the disposition to provide him with some extra training so he can understand the OBs, how to analyze it and get back into the standardization pattern. But if it's many trainers who are giving us this information with an unobserved grading, then we should look at the module design. If many trainers are saying us that they don't see opportunities to observe this competency, then the problem is going to be at the module level. So we get different ways to interpret this information, and also we use this non-observed grading to comply with some topics of the regulation. So it's really very useful. And the last one is a sub-pattern of the first pattern. It's an examiner in a mixed Ebt program, an evaluator in a baseline program that never gives a grade 2 on day 1. And this is a problem. No, it's the Santa Claus model. The examiners and evaluators that never grades a 2 in day 1. And that's not a good thing, because as we know, day 1 is the day who detects the learning opportunity on the pilot. So if we don't get these tools and the combination of tools that are going to eventually lead to this tailored training in the pilots, we are going to eliminate the possibility for that pilot to have had this tailored training and upgrading the level of performance as soon as possible to the grade 3, and eliminated in the future the possibility of obtaining a grading below the minimum acceptable. So we need to fix this kind of pattern as soon as possible of the examiners and evaluators that module after module are not able to grade 2 when it's necessary for tailored training opportunities in the pilots. So how are we going to do that? Well, through a very powerful tool for the very first time ever we have through Ebt, and it's data based on evidence. In this case, evidence from their own training system performance. When we find these trainers that could be outside the standardization, obviously in a total non-punitive way and in absolutely confidential way, they have a chat, they have a recurrent personal and concordant assurance day. It used to be a chat with me, probably in a coffee shop, when I'm going to show to them this heat map. And this is really powerful feedback. For the first time ever, with the trainers, we're going to see a whole picture, a very precise image on how we behave inside the sim, on how we do the things inside the sim. And we can do it from the last module, from the last 2 modules, from the last year, for the last 3 years, whatever we think is interesting to show. And for us, the trainers, seeing ourselves reflected in a heat map like this is very interesting, because the first reactions is, this is me, this is how I'm grading, why am I doing this, or why am I doing that? And this is the reaction we're looking for. Is the same underlying principles that we are doing in an Ebt program with the pilots, even the facilitated briefing. What we are looking at is a self-reflection. Now you have all your data. If this is who you are inside the sim, do you like it? Do you want to make some adjustments, any changes for the future? And this is how we adjust this concordant assurance in a total confidential and absolutely non-punitive way. So in the end, we began this presentation, so defining concordant assurance as a living being, and this is how we may look at it. The first time could be an scary thing for Ebt managers and also for trainers. Am I going to be able to do that? I'm going to be able to be standardized. I'm going to be able to handle all of that. What we need to understand is concordant assurance is not a static thing. It's not there at all. On the contrary, it's totally alive, and it's going to be moving. We need to get used to that. It's going to be some sort of living being. Sometimes we'll be asleep, others will be awake, and others it will be too much awake, jumping a little bit up and down on the figures, left to right, and some right to left according to the internal and external factors. For example, right now, we have the example of a very powerful external disrupting factor, that it is the COVID-19. So what we have to do is give concordant assurance enough space to live comfortably, enough room to move, provide the trainers and also the trainees the right tools to work through the program and understand we want this human factor. We don't want robots in the sim. We want pilots flying the sim, and we want trainers grading these pilots. But this is the beauty of the EBT, and this is the power of the EBT, and this is what makes this EBT being alive. The job regarding concordant assurance of the training manager is just paying attention to when this concordant assurance wants to jump too far away and take it back when it should be living comfortably within limits, within boundaries. So wrapping up, and to finish, all we have seen about concordant assurance, this is not about telling the trainers what to grade. On the contrary, this is about telling the trainers, providing the trainers with the right tools, with the right knowledge in a recurrent basis to know how to do it properly. Not what to grade, but how to do it properly. So thank you very much for your attention. And Francisco, if I'm able to stop sharing this, the floor will be yours.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. And now we're gonna have a break, but before the break, I would like to bring to the floor to Frederick for some reminders about the polls that we are doing. Frederick?
Yeah, hey, Francisco. So yeah, as I indicated before, and for those that are just joining us after the last coffee break, there's another poll that's going to come up just now, and John Franklin's going to help us out with that. And this poll is a little more into understanding what exactly are the reasons for you coming to the webinar, and understanding what needs there are from an information basis, so that we can also steer further safety promotion activities from EASA. So please participate in the poll. Let your voice count, and we're going to share some of the results with you at the end of the Q&A session as well, so that we can reflect back to you also what we think are the items that we might need to take on board. So fill in the call as you get another coffee break, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Francisco, you're the master of the agenda.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to let you know that the polling has a 5-minute time limit. I don't know if it's intended, or you would like to extend.
It's a small error. I'll fix it when it gets to the end.
Okay, thanks, John. So we have a 10-minute break again. So we will start at 15:37 sharp. Thank you very much. Okay, John, I will start again. Can you hear me fine?
I can. Sounds good.
Thank you. So now the purpose of this module 3 is a discussion or an open discussion led by Frederick and Andy Mitchell. I will introduce first Frederick. Frederick Muheim is a researcher from the National Aerospace Center, the Royal Dutch Aerospace Center, NLR. He started his career as he's an engineer, aeronautical engineer. He did an interim in the National Transport Safety Board in the US, and he started in the NLR as an interim, and then to do his thesis, and then he joined NLR as a full-time employee 7 years ago. He has different research papers published, and today, since 3 years ago, he's the Ebt program manager for the National Aerospace Center. So just a radio check and a welcome to Frederick.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. And with Frederick, Andy Mitchell will also participate as a presenter in this Module 3 of the EASA webinar on Ebt. Andy Mitchell has an extensive curriculum in aviation. He was a pilot in EasyJet, captain, standard captain, and many other positions. He, in his consultant field, he is part of the Ebt core group member in EASA, in IATA. He also participated in the rulemaking task 0599 as a consultant, and he's a private consultant himself, both in CBTA and also in software, because he's the founder of a software company. So welcome, Andy. Radio check, please.
Really 55, Francisco, and just to mention the main representation today for me is as a member of the ATPG.
Yes, yes, he's the chair, recently chair of the ATPG, but you will also provide the spectrum and the activities that you do. The ATPG is the Air Crew Training Policy Group. It's a EASA advisory group, and you will detail a little bit your activities in a moment. So Frederick, Andy, the floor is yours. Welcome, and yeah.
Great, thanks, Francisco. This last section of the this event is, as we've mentioned before, is a Q&A session. So there's a little bit of question and answers. Because there's so many of you and so little of us, we've had to prepare a little bit. We've been taking a look at all the questions that you've been asking, so thank you for that. In the chat, we've collected them, and we've tried to distribute them so that we can at least cover as much ground as we can in the next 50 minutes. So having said that, the next 50 minutes, we want to actually go through 3 different themes. We want to talk about Ebt from the perspective of the pilot. We want to talk about this from the perspective of the instructor. And at last, we also want to talk about this at a program level. And so we've divided the questions and the topics a little bit along these 3 themes. Andy and I will be moderating this session. So I'll be running the first session and the third session, and Andy will take over for the second session. So we're going to go a little bit back and forth. And we're going to also double back with you, hopefully with some of the poll results by the end of the Q&A session. So stick with us till the end, and then and hopefully we can share a little bit about what you've been able to provide us as in the poll. So having said that, a series of questions about the pilot. So we actually just want to start out, and Andy, as Andy just indicated, he's here from the perspective of the ATPG. And so actually one of the first questions I want to throw out is looking into the future, Andy, either the short term or the long term, what would be the ATPG's perspective on what we've been discussing today?
Yeah, thanks, Frederick. That's very kind of you. So, well, buenas tardes a todos. Bonjour a tous. Good afternoon from Madrid. Privileged to be here today. From the ATPG's perspective, Frederick, I think I'll cover both short and long term, actually, if you don't mind. In the short term, of course, we want to see more and more airlines reaching baseline Ebt in an efficient and a simple way. But we'd like to add a health warning to that. This is going to come about by those airlines, just like Iberia and Air France, putting aside individual opinions on what they think is best and building a robust EBT program based on the industry best practices, for which now the first time we have them validated against objective data complementing the expert's opinion. When I say best practices, of course, I'm referring to the EASA, AMCs, GMs, safety promotion material, plus, of course, the baseline checklist, as Francisco discussed earlier. To expand on this, one of the challenges we're going to see and are seeing as we now adopt performance-based regulation is identifying where the flexibility lies and what prerequisites are required in the form of quality data to allow for that flexibility. A decision from anyone to move away from best practices could put an implementation in jeopardy and could lead to a poor user experience for the end users. This brings us onto the longer term vision. Now, we should celebrate the massive effect that best practice EBT is going to have on the real end user of EBT, the real customer, which is the pilot. Best practice EBT is going to be the springboard to having dynamic tailored training for individual pilots, rather than the static requirements from an Appendix 9, or the requirements based solely on large demographics such as ATQP. This will, for the first time, empower those pilots to take ownership of the training, both inside and outside of the sim, effectively self-reflect on learning points, a bit like Ignacio was talking about earlier, and also ultimately to be able to deal with the unexpected, as Bernard mentioned right at the start. It's going to lead to safer skies through more resilient and happier pilots. And the ATPG sees the combination of tailored training and this potential for evolving the data report based on compatible cross-industry training data as the two huge strategic wins of EBT.
Great. That's quite a lot of different things to reflect on right there. And then one particular thing that you mentioned, which was quite interesting, is actually to go back to the experience of the pilot, which I think is key, because in all the regulations and all the things we do, we might lose track of that, as you say, the end customer of this whole spiel. And actually today we've got a special guest in the panel. A lot of people that have spoken about EBT quite a long while, but we've got one special guest that I'd like to introduce, and that is Ms. Lilia Gomez Rubio. And Lilia, if you want to join us with webcam and a bit of audio, we'd actually like to get you on stage. And just as a brief introduction, Lilia's been flying with Iberia for the past 21 years and has had some flight experience across numerous different types of aircraft. And as a first officer there, she's also been the recipient of the first Appendix 10, AP 10 baseline training at Iberia. And that's actually quite special, because that is, we could say, a milestone in this industry. And so, Lilia, thank you for joining us. We actually wanted to just ask you a few questions about your own experience, experiencing this EBT that we're talking about. And so maybe could you start out, maybe just to provide your experience, your perspective on what differences you've seen between traditional simulator sessions and EBT sessions of more recent years.
Hi, everybody. Well, the main difference is to have more time for training, especially on the assessment day, because we don't have to do all the standards AP9 and many of us. So you have more time for the LOE and the training. You train a more realistic scenery, and you have a much more interactive debriefing that allows you to improve your awareness on your strengths and weaknesses. It gives you the opportunity to learn how to enhance your performance. And of course, something obvious is that you obtain their validation on the second day, the training day, instead of in the first one.
How do you then experience this training? Do you experience it differently? Do you have different pressures, or are you more nervous or less nervous? How does that affect the way that you feel and affect the way that you also address, how do you approach the training then? Is it radically different, or?
Well, when we started in the area Ebt, I and another colleague didn't like it, because we felt we were being evaluated on every single simulator session. instead of 1 day only. But over time, I realized that this is an advantage because your revalidation doesn't depend on the LPC day only, but on the 4 simulator sessions of the year. Also, I have more trust in the system now because I know that every year from now, we will have an update simulator module customized on the requirements or our airlines or our fleet, because the weaknesses may be observed not just an individual, also as a group. And that will allow us to train on what we really need.
Absolutely. And does it also, is there a change, this is the final question, is there a change in the way that you approach the training session itself? So if the training session is scheduled and you have to go, are you approaching it in a different way or an attitude, or?
Yes, definitely. Before DVT, the simulator session was very predictable. All the sessions, but especially the Ebt 9 and maneuver section. As I suppose you all know, we did the same year after year. An engine failure before B1, an engine failure after B1, and so on. That was so boring, so unpredictable, and nothing like real life. So you only studied what you were going to do in that session. But now the evaluation sessions are more similar to reality. You go to the simulator, assessment day, without knowing what will happen to you. Not even in which system you are going to have the malfunction. So the preparation is more generic. I really try to study everything, but that is not possible at all. So therefore, it makes it more a mixed preparation with which to face the problems than the abnormality in themselves.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing your insights and your experiences. It's
yeah. 1 second, Freddie, sorry to interrupt, but I would like to give congratulations to Lilia for the first ever AP10 pilot. I was the trainer in that sim because I want to check that at the management level everything was going right, and it was a privilege to see that the Evt for the first time was alive, was working, and Lilia did a super job. So my congratulations, Lilia. Un abrazo.
Thank you.
Enhorabuena, Lilia.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome, and it's great to have you here. So thank you very much again for providing your personal experience and your willingness to share that as well. I think that's also a key aspect of EBT here, this different dialogue that we can have with each other. And Ignacio, you just joined us, but please come back because I think and all the panel members, I believe we can just keep the webcams open, and then we can have more of a going back and forth. I actually have a question for you, Nacho. One of the things that also came up is what have you also been able to see like a change in the pilot competencies? Have you been able to monitor that and identify which weaknesses there are? How powerful are those insights for you?
Well, about that evolution, yeah, absolutely. During the 3 years and the previous one, we have also another extra year doing training and assessment according to Ebt principles, as Sylvia Trancoso, our authority, that I also want to really thank them because it's been an example of how an implementation process should be, of a mutual support and mutual confidence. We came directly from legacy. So we had to adapt all our legacy training directly to the EBT. So we have been for years, let's say, as training during this assessment and training according to Ebt principles in 2017, and then the 3 years of mixed Ebt, gathering all this data. And yeah, absolutely, we have been seeing how the competency has been evolving for the best in practically all the cases, but not only at the level of the competencies. I think for this feature, what you need to be sure as concordant assurance we talked before is that you have the right tools to do this analysis. So we are doing not only at the level of the competency, but also at the level of the OBs, so we can check exactly how OBs are involved when the things go right, and also when the things go not so right, and extracting all the conclusions and the way to go further. But also in the customization of the sim sessions with SMS data, and also from gathering of our own training system performance. So in the end, it's about your resources, the capability you have, and being sure that you have the good tools, the effective tools to do that. But having said that, I think the real game begins right now, because even we have seen this evolution, and we have been following that kind of trends. We cannot forget that during the mixed Ebt period, there's some disruptions because you also have to comply with LPCs, OPCs, old-fashioned, let's say, legacy training, or OFC 230. So it's not a pure Ebt competency training. So from now on, we are going to begin with this pure Ebt. We have to get rid of all of that small disruption things. And I think that in these next 3 years, we are really to be able to see a more clear picture how these competencies, OBs, and different features evolve for the better, absolutely, but it's going to be much easier to do that analysis.
Great, thank you. And Fabienne, maybe from your perspective, at Air France, are you down a similar path with respect to monitoring the competencies and also the OBs, or have you been? What insights have you already been able to?
Well, as we started with the ATQP, we've been able to go down to the individual level, but of course we do not do that on a regular basis. We do go through the individual level whenever it's needed for a single pilot. Otherwise, for the time being, we're just focusing on the fleet and population, roughly first officers on one side, commanders on the other side, and we do that for every fleet we have. That would be the main purpose of the lookout.
And Fabienne, a question for just carrying on from there. With regards to your pilots, how have you found their engagement with coming into both mixed Ebt and baseline? How's that sort of engagement been with the pilots, and what have you perhaps done? What could you share in terms of maybe some top tips in terms of engaging with pilots moving into Ebt?
Well, once again, we've been lucky because we did most of the work for the ATQP. So I'm just going to talk about the ATQP because it would be really similar to what would have been done for the ABT. Whenever you move to the ATQP, the first point pilots are looking at is if I cannot be tested on something I know, then maybe I shall not be tested fairly. That was the main point that was coming up for the ATQP. And after a few months, of course, a few years, but after a few months, pilots can, exactly what Lilia said, they can see that this is much more relevant for them to be trained through evaluation that phases maneuver training and scenario-based training. So, of course, you have to go through the whole change management explanations. You have to explain then what's going to move on. And afterwards, after just a few months, they can see all the benefits of that. So it's been really helpful to explain them and to show them that they are now just evaluated on what is the real life and not only the Appendix 9 exercises.
Great.
So I suppose it goes back a little bit to Lilia's comment earlier about the trust that she mentioned in her part. I think, as you say, Fabienne, you can educate them both by documentation, change management, but also it's to do with the proof being in the pudding, right? As we say in English, like It's about demonstrating the trust and the improvements across the board. Frederick, you wanted to?
Nope, sorry, my Cisco crashed. I'm back. You've taken control, and I think it's perfect because looking at the time, I think it's great that we move on to instructors and
Yes,
then we double back.
Thanks. So the focus so far is obviously and quite rightly being very much about the pilot competencies. You know, that is the benchmark framework behind the scenes here. But as we move forwards, of course, we're gonna start looking at competencies across the board of other operators and stakeholders. And of course, the next one probably naturally in the sequence is of course the instructor. The instructors, of course, themselves are going to have and do have their own competency set. The first question I'd like to maybe just bring out on that point from a regulatory perspective. So, question perhaps for Francisco, if he doesn't mind, is looking at the regulation. We have the pilot competencies at AMC level, and we have the IECs, the instructor competencies at GM level. Would you mind maybe just explaining to the audience the rationale behind that decision?
Thank you, Andy. I have with me Ascanio, who is the senior expert on instructor and examiner. But let me. So the issue we had in EASA is that its pilot competencies were clearly been an industry-wide effort, and there was a clear consensus about the Ebt competencies. While the instructor competencies were really new because they were implemented during the State Letter 77 ECHO in ICAO and become applicable in November 2020. And we wanted to wait a little bit to make sure that those instructor competencies are widely accepted by the industry, and that's the reason behind having a GM instead of AMC. But I don't know if Ascanio, you want to complement on anything?
No, you see, yeah, almost everything about this.
Okay, so that was the reason, the rationale behind having the instructor competencies at GM level instead of an AMC as the pilot competence.
Okay, thank you, Francisco. That's great insight from the regulatory perspective. Going on to a more practical perspective, then, if I could ask the question to Ignacio, what sort of techniques and priorities did you apply when it came to your instructors, your instructor training, development? Can you give us some insights into perhaps some lessons learned in that field and the priorities that you applied?
Well, thank you, Andy. As we have said right now, we need a new powerful tool that all this framework of trainer and evaluator competencies that are now including the ORFC 231. So I think from now on, what we need to do is following the same underlying principles we are doing with the pilots. We are providing pilots in an Ebt system with a whole core of competencies so they can face all the expected but also the unexpected things. So let's follow the same underlying principles, and we're going to provide the trainers with another set of competencies so they can face anything expected, but also to give them tools to face all the unexpected things that in a daily basis happens during the sim session. So adapt, including this new set of competencies for trainers and evaluators into the initial course of the Ebt trainers. It's really paramount. But the next step, I think, in the short run, will be the real upgrade that we have been able to do with AP10 and AP9 substituting. So the world of FCL and Ops just merge a little bit in some aspects. What to me is going to be the real upgrade for the trainers is if we are able to make this kind of training the trainer course that merges somehow this FCL trainer course that they have to do in the beginning to obtain the initial trainer certificate with the later on Ebt training, the trainer course they have to do within the airline in-house to adapt to the Ebt procedures. That is totally up. So I think the future is going to be, or should be, looking for that upgrade, merging both courses with the so powerful instructor competencies we have right now, and giving them the right tools to be able to interact with the pilots in a more effective way in this new philosophy that we try them to convert into a coach more than the ordinary trainer or examiner, and also providing them with these tools to be always within that limits of the concordant assurance that is so important.
Brilliant, thanks, Ignacio. That's a really great, I think, vision for the future. I think your thoughts regarding trying to align, the underlying principles across different competency sets is quite a fundamental principle. Fabian, from your side within France, Ignacio was mentioning train-the-trainer courses. How's the experience been? What's the feedback been like from the instructors, the trainers, as they've gone through that course for you? Can you give us any insights into just generally how it's been for the instructors and the feedback that they've given you?
Oh, once again, I would say that EBT is hard for instructors. When I say hard, because whenever you are training, checking an appendix 9, it's quite easy, pass or fail. That's easy. You're just outside the scope. I'm sorry, this is a fail. And even if your competencies are not that good, but if you've been able to remain into the envelope, that's perfect. It is a pass. Whenever you move to the competency-based training, you have to assess the whole scope of the competencies for the pilots. So this is hard. So we have, first of all, to be sure that the instructor will be confident. And for that, the main purpose would be to make, I would say, CBTA for instructors, which means that, of course, for training, you have a standard scheme, but that scheme should be adapted to the individual you have in front of you. Whenever you have an instructor that does not feel confident, so no problem, we're going to add training. We're going to give you tips to be sure that the next module you're going to handle will be perfectly done, and that you will be confident, and that you will be able to use all your pedagogical skills for that training. Afterwards, so this is to develop instructors and to be ready for them to be on a close management system. Whenever you have experienced instructors, it is not that important. Then you need to monitor. And once again, the system monitors the instructors, but the data are not for the system only. So the data are available for the instructor. Should you want to know how you grade, you have access to the data, and then you can see how you grade, because you will be the only person available to work on your own competencies as an instructor. So everything is clear, everything is available for the instructor, and whatever the needs you have, you will find someone to help you on this. Build confidence for the instructors, and then the BT will follow.
Thanks, Fabian. That goes back a little bit to what we said earlier about the empowerment. We're looking to empower the pilots to take ownership of the training and their development, and it sounds like we can then apply exactly the same thing regarding the instructors as well. Maybe we just go a step further and bring in the regulators here as well. Maybe I could ask the question to Sylvia. Sylvia, what about the inspectors? What sort of approach did you take? Was that a new approach, maybe more modern compared to before in terms of training? Can you just give us maybe some background on how the inspectors from the regulator from AESA were trained?
Well, that's a very good question. As a national authority and in compliance with the Airlines regulation, we have developed a specific training for flight ops inspectors. But this is compliance. And additionally, we consider that the flight ops inspectors should attend the instructors training arranged by the operator to know how their system and how instructors score pilots' competencies. And this is what we have done with Iberia until now. In 2017, the FOI assigned to Iberia attended instructors training. He also participated in the different simulator sessions arranged to gather data from the system and validate it. So that's what we have done so far. After that, We have also developed a specific checklist for inspectors to ease the process and to be sure that they have into account all the different points required to follow and to check at the proper implementation of the system with different operators.
That's great, Sylvia. Thank you. And it sounds to me like some of the important maybe keywords that come out of that, you mentioned compliance, but also versus the best practice. So on one side you have compliance, but you also have, say, this best practice of actually going and attending the courses, and that engagement from an early stage with the operator must really help with the overall approval, the journey, to go along on the journey with them.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Great, thank you, Sylvia. Thank you. Okay, well, we're getting towards the end of the time for the instructor section, so I'm going to just move on a couple of questions and ask maybe Frederick for some input. We talked a bit about ICAP in different areas there. We talked about pilot performance, instructor performance. We had the presentation earlier from Ignacio on concordance assurance specifically. Frederick, maybe from your perspective, what do you see with regards to ICAP? Why do we bother? What does it bring to the table?
Well, one of the things that that already was indicated, of course, also by Ignacio, is that ICAP. The purpose of ICAP is to also underpin the reliability of and the suitability of your instructors and the program to deliver data that's valid, and that data can then also be used to revalidate licenses in the exterior program. So it's essential that data is good. So that's one practical reason for it. But there's actually, I think, also another angle here, which is also not to be underestimated, and that's looking at this from the perspective of continuous improvement. So we're looking at developing resilience at the pilot. We're asking them to self-evaluate. We're looking at continuously increasing, identifying their training needs, working at them, bringing it to the next level. And essentially, it'd be weird if we didn't apply that to the instructors as well. So it's kind of practicing what you preach. So to some extent, it's also nice to have that feedback cycle at the instructor level, and to say, hey, transitioning from legacy training into CBTA is a big change. There's a lot of things that the change in the balance between training and technique and the techniques that we use. And as such, that's not a tick in the box exercise. That's a continuous journey, like that's already indicated. And so as such, if you look at ICAP, you can actually connect it with standardization, and that's part of a continuous improvement program. And I would actually vouch to turn it around and not look at it from a compliance point of view, but to look at it as a way to further embed those philosophies of EBT and at the instructor level.
Good, thanks, Frederick. Yeah, that's great. I mean, and just going on from that, we had a question from the audience from I'm going to try and pronounce this properly. Pieterjan de Jager. I hope I pronounced that somewhere correct. And he asked the question with regards to concordance requirements. He asked whether there's mean, median, and mode sort of options in terms of averages. Are there any sort of general insights you can give in terms of the ways we should be presenting the ICAP to the authorities to show a good level of demonstration?
Yeah, I think if we're going to go into the details of the numbers of ICAPs, we should have like 2-hour session in itself. So that I'll take 10 seconds to see if I can reply to this. But Francisco, I think you can also vouch for this. It's really up to the operator and the NAA. That's not a push-off answer like, okay, sort it. But I think it's important that both those parties think and engage. What are the things that we want to achieve? What's the performance we want to achieve? And so to say there's one limit and that's the hard limit is a bit of a compliance attitude to a performance-based system. And really what you want is a discussion that talks about, well, where are we now, and where do we want to be, and how do we get there? And there's really this kind of growth mindset that you want to take forward. There is, of course, the limit, so you need to make sure that it develops, because we're talking about safety here. But it's having that kind of discussion as well, and not just saying, here's the number and we'll talk in 2 years. It is that collaborative approach that also Sylvia had indicated.
Thank you, Frederick. Yeah, that's some really good insights, and very good for about a 30-second description of ICAP. Thank you. I think that gives us about the time now on the instructor section. Frederick, do you want to perhaps just push forward now and talk more about the program side of things with EBT?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of questions on the program side, so I'm afraid that we're not going to be able to cover all the questions that came in, but I do think it would be nice to see if we can touch on a few. Well, one question that came in, and Francisco, this is actually a question I think right into your area. is EBT approval possible if an operator collects very little data, so little FDM or no feedback from instructors? A question from Guillaume Marie. Is that possible? Like, how far can we go into EBT without collecting a lot of data? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, regarding the FDM, there's a requirement in EASA in auto AOC to have FDM data, and it's mandatory from depending on the weight of the aircraft and some other things can be done in auto AOC. However, EBT, and this is especially targeting the small operators and the small aircraft operators, there's no such requirement that FDM must be within an EBT program. So there are other ways to contextualize the EBT program. There's SMS, and there's state safety plans and other sources of data that can be used. Regarding the internal training data, the regulation is very clear. You know, you have 9 competencies, you have 1 to 5 grading, and you have 2 simulator sessions in every module, and you're going to obtain data. There's certain levels of gathering data with the grading that I explained in my presentation, level 0, level 1, level 2, and there are certain requirements when you need to opt for a level 1 or when you need a little bit more leverage on that data. We did a big effort to ensure that obviously evidence-based training is evidence, is competency-based training plus evidence. That's why it's evidence-based training. However, we were very careful to not make a program where we overload with data. And I said already in my presentation that the data that the operator needs to have is meaningful data. And there's a discussion, obviously, as you said, with the authority on what is that data set. I cannot answer, as you can imagine, and the same for you on ICAP, exactly what has to be done and what is the specifics of this particular operator of that gentleman. But the regulation already provides certain levels depending on the size of the operator, and I think the regulation is clear on what has to be obtained, what data needs to be obtained. Back to you, Frederick.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Well, you're right about that dialogue, the facilitated dialogue that has to happen. But you mentioned small operators, and maybe could you just take another 30 seconds and quickly provide your thoughts on how EBT might look very complex and convoluted for small operators that are, that only have a few aircraft or a few tens of instructors or pilots. But what areas do you find are EBT flex well to smaller operators that you can kind of decomplexify and that it's still reachable for smaller operators?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Obviously, I can remind, especially to the small operators, that we have a program, the SPT 012, that I already presented in my presentation, which we can help especially the inspectors coming from the authority and also the individual operators to help develop their EBT program. The first point of contact of a small operator should be their own authority. I think they can provide some help. And then in the regulation, we have provided different options depending on how big you are. The regulatory impact assessment of the EASA in the MPA already explained some views on that. And then there are some examples. I cannot go into all the details, but for example, the ICAP, which is a very, and the standardization of the instructor, that could be a very data-driven for a big operator, because you have the amount of data to make conclusions over this data. For the small operators, we clearly identify that it can be a more qualitative approach rather than a quantitative approach or a statistical approach. So this is, for example, in terms of the instructor standardization, it can be done that way. We also have, the grading of the pilots, 9 competencies, 1 to 5. I think this is available for all operators. However, then the conclusions where there's little data, then it has to be a more qualitative assessment. And here again, we have flexibilized. So I don't know. I can already now say to all the small operators out there that there's the Ebt implementation can be done also in their environment. That there are different safety promotion tasks and you know. Also consultants and institutions that can help small operators to develop their Ebt program. That don't be afraid and you know and try to implement. Start with the Ebt according to the Ebt principle, the implementation according to the Ebt principle, and slowly progress to Ebt mix, and then when you are ready, progress to the baseline. Back to you, Frederick. I don't know, 1 second, because maybe Ascanio, there are two elements that you can intervene. One is about the Ebt instructors.
Yeah, maybe we can cover one aspect that could be interesting for a small operator or especially for a business jet operator, and is about the instructor. Maybe because they could have not enough instructor to provide the entire standardization, so they would make use of other operators to start with the let's say with the standardization and see how the other operators are working, especially in the business jet where they can share resources. And an additional aspect that was mentioned before by all the guys about the instructor qualification for the Ebt. Just to recall that instructor as a TRI certificate is regulated by the part FCF from their crew regulation, and the Ebt instructor is a pure ops regulation. So this was also another aspect why we decided to not having binding regulation or regulatory requirements for the Ebt instructor.
Yeah, and provide the GM instead of the AMC. Back to you, Frederick.
Thank you. And I think on this topic, there are a lot of questions about programs, and I think a lot of them will actually go back to you as representatives of EASA. However, there's actually one I think I really want to ask you is the question from Georgi Doganov. ATQP, do operators who currently use ATQP have credits to allow them to move faster to Ebt, to baseline Ebt even?
Thank you very much. Well, this is an interesting question that maybe also Fabian or you know could elaborate, because obviously he has the insight of this matter. We published in 2015 the ED decision 027 2015 027R for mixed implementation. There we clarify and introduce in OROFC A245 RGM regarding this matter. There's some obvious, which Fabian already mentioned in his presentation. There are some obvious credits, if I say, or processes that can be obtained for ATQP, and that will help during the Ebt mix implementation. However, at the same time, I would like to say that Air France, although it was ATQP, you need to spend 3 years of mixed ATQP implementation before you go into baseline. So you
mixed Ebt.
And Fabian can correct me or can elaborate a little bit more, but I think the transition from legacy to Ebt mixed, maybe some of the processes can be credited, or the operator can have a little bit more experience when they come from ATQP. Frederick, I give the floor to you in case you want to give the floor to Fabian.
Well, I think that's a good idea. Fabian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just want to be sure that people understood that, unfortunately, mixed, ATQP cannot be credited by itself for the Ebt. You have to go through the mixed Ebt process. And yes, what Francisco said, I hope that presentation showed that whenever you move towards ATQP in any way, you can start moving towards Ebt. So as always, all the work you've done previously can be used and can be useful for the Ebt implementation.
Perfect. I think that's a valid. So there's no direct accreditation, but there's a lot of experience that you can take forward, that you can build on. We're actually coming to near the end of this. I think we can just add 1 or 2 questions. So I just want to, before we close and I run through the panel for any last remarks, Andy, is there any question that you've got on your list that you really want to ask at this point in time? Anything else that we weren't able to cover before?
No, I don't think so, Frederick. I think we've covered what we wanted to cover in terms of the main points. So no, I think we're good. We mentioned the small operators. So no, I think we're looking good, Frederick, to start to summarize with the team. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think I want to run through the panel and just see if any of all the panel members have something as a takeaway that they want to provide and they want to share with the audience. But maybe, well, we can, just before we do that, maybe we can actually show the results of the poll. John, might you be able to show some of the results? Maybe if question 5 or, oh, yeah, there we go. I've got the whole poll there. Let's see, are they all here?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can only show the whole poll. So this is
interesting. So there's a lot of 272 people in the room here, and a few people have indicated, for instance, what topics would like to be discussed, and I see some attention for training and standardization. Yeah, I think it's still pretty quiet actually. There's another poll, I believe, John. Could you just see that? Oh no, is that all? Is that all actually?
there's the other one.
Okay, so yeah, we see a mix of operators as well. Yeah, so the poll is a little bit of an experiment to see if we have a little bit of a formalized way to understand what the needs are. I think we still need to take a look at this data, so we'll see if we can find any insights to populate. So without spending more attention on that than we need to, let me just quickly run through and see if there are any last tips or thoughts that the poll members would like to share. And Andy, maybe I can just start with you there.
Yeah, Frederick. So yeah, just to reiterate, really, I think I'll just make one point from the ATPG, which is please look to follow best practices. They're established. They're based on really good objective data. They work well, as Air France and Iberia have now demonstrated. Keep it simple and engage with people who can help you along the way and plan well would be my top tip to take away.
Perfect. And Ignacio, may I ask you if you have any last takeaways or things that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, it's been a great afternoon. I think we have talked really in depth with very interesting topics. Just to say, as an advice for everybody who wants to switch from legacy or ATQP to Ebt, as Fabian said, it's paramount the relationship with your authority. So stay all the way along with them, build a relationship totally based on mutual support and confidence. And when things doesn't go right, because it's a long journey, so this is not if things are going to be trouble sometimes, but when. Don't try to hide figures, don't try to pretend everything is good. So think of your authority as part of the solution and stay with them all the time through the process.
Very nice to reinforce that sense of dialogue throughout. Fabienne, may I ask you for any final thoughts that you want to share? Fabienne is there?
Are you on mute, Fabian?
Okay, do you get me now?
Yes, we can hear you
perfect.
now.
I would say that a very general tip. I've heard a lot of questions trying to know how did other people implemented the EBT? How did Air France do that? How did Iberia go through that process? But to all people listening, I would say just do what you think and consider is right for your training. Just remember that the main point of EBT is to improve flight safety. So aim at improving flight safety by enhancing training for the pilots. And if you are right, if you do consider that your actions will be improving flight safety, then I'm sure that you will be able to sell that to your authority and to go through the whole process with them. Just think about your system. Don't try to make a copy of the other system, maybe that won't fit your personal needs. So do what you think is right, and then that will follow up.
Very nice. Looking at the performance and looking at that end performance metric. Thank you. And Sylvia, may I ask you for any reflections or thoughts from the NEA perspective?
Well, from the point of view of the authority, I would say that it is decisive to get inspectors involved in airlines data collection phase before mixed Ebt phase start. Airlines should open the doors and invite authority to see what they are doing, as Ignacio has said, because it's the only way to move on properly with the approval. On the other hand, it's important to get in touch with your license department, the authority, because they should know about operators Ebt baseline, because even both procedures, the one for delegation of signature of pilot endorsement and the one to renew the license, will be approved in Ops manual. But the license expert or the license department should agree them. Well, okay. In fact, in a nutshell, what I want to get across is that they have to understand what is the operator Ebt cycle to give it full credit in terms of enrolled pilot licenses. It's the same as kids at school. It's a continuous assessment for Appendix 10.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And on the final side, and I think that might also be a nice point to hand it over, Francisco and Ascanio, from EASA's perspective, anything you want to share or provide as a takeaway?
Ascanio, I start or?
Yeah, I it's not just saying that although it's a training which is dedicated or AOC holders oriented, is don't be shy. Think about it because it's open to everyone, to all operators, and as all the other participants have said, if you believe you can enhance your training, think about Ebt. I think that your authority and as well as EASA, and I will let Francisco to complement, will be more than happy to support you if you decide to start with this new path. Francisco.
Thank you, Ascanio. No, for me, I would like to say that Ebt is the future. It's still a voluntary program, but it's highly recommended. This will put your pilots to be trained for today's risk, but also for future risk. Consider that safety is the first priority of the agency, but it's also the first priority of all the training managers and also the authority. And this system will provide real data, real experience for you to be able to analyze and to mitigate the future operational risk. So Frederick, back to you. When you finish, I would like to do some closing remarks in terms of bureaucracy and all of that together with John. Okay.
Perfect. The only thing I have to mention is that there are a lot of questions that came in, also themes about approach clustering, malfunctions, ICAP, harmonization, line checks, basic concepts, and even the future of single pilot operations in combination with Ebt. And I think a lot of these questions still need to be answered. So we've made an attempt to try to do that in the last 3 hours. And if your question has not been answered, don't fear. Either reach out, I believe, to also Francisco, and I think Francisco, I'm not going to steal your thunder. It's over to you to announce how this will proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. As I already said, we're going to take all your questions. We did a poll to understand what are your needs. And then we will start on the third quarter 2021, on the 29th September 2021, with a series of webinars on the basis of the data and the questions we received. Obviously, we will try to combine some kind of democratic view in which is the hot topics as displayed in the pool and in the questions, but also that makes sense from a tailored story point of view, because we will do a series of webinars through the third quarter, fourth quarter, and first quarter 2022. And we need to make sure that all those webinars has a storytelling and it has a line of a story. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for being there and collaborate with us. I'm going to hand over to John Franklin to close, and see you, all of you, on the 29th of September. And John, don't forget to clarify when they can register for the next workshop. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, Francisco. So we're just in the middle of moving across to the latest version of the WebEx tool. So you'll be able to register in early August. And what we have, we'll be able to email you all both after this event when the video and the presentations are available online, so you know where they are. I just put the link again into the chat box to the evidence-based training page on the EASA AirOps community. And actually there's a comment function there as well, and we do keep an eye and monitor those. So keep comments and questions coming in there. And that's where we'll post kind of all the updates. There'll be a main EASA page with the core, kind of more core, all the core deliverables. So you can find it also on the EASA website, and the information will always be updated together anyway. But the community site just enables it to be, dare I say, a little bit less formal and regulatory speak, and more, a bit more collaborative in that sense. The other thing we have is we've recently started a LinkedIn discussion group called Conversation Aviation, where again it provides a place for people to, kind of safety managers and people implementing different safety initiatives to get together and kind of talk and share ideas and things. And we're just starting that kind of building up as well now. So keep an eye on the material. As I say, things will continually be updated, and we'll let you know again once the material's both online from this session, and then also once you have the ability to register for the next one. But thanks very much, and thank you all for your time, and hopefully you found it interesting and useful. And particularly thanks to Francisco and the EASA colleagues who put so much work into coordinating them with our fantastic panelists as well. So thanks to all of you panelists and the EASA colleagues for such a great job. Have a nice evening. I think somebody said there was some football to watch. Says the German Englishman.